She ordered the filet mignon before I even sat down. That should have been the first sign, not the food itself, but the way she did it. Waved off the waiter like I was late to my own execution. Her wine glass was already half empty, a lipstick ring floating at the rim. She didn't look up when I slid into the booth, didn't say hi, just reached into her bag, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and dropped it beside the bread basket like it was a damn menu. "Happy anniversary," she said, finally looking me in the eye. Her tone was smug, rehearsed. "You'll find everything's fair." I didn't touch the envelope, just stared at it like it might explode. In a way, it had already. "Nothing personal," she added, cutting into the bread. "We just want different things." We. I opened it. Divorce papers, served not by a courier, not by a lawyer, but over a candle-lit dinner at Casa Bellina, where I'd proposed to her 31 years ago with a cheap ring and a trembling voice. She'd cried then, said yes like it meant something. Now she was grinning like a satisfied lawyer after a tight verdict. She raised her glass. "To new beginnings." I stood up, didn't touch my wine, didn't ask questions, didn't give her the fight she wanted. I just walked out, past the waiter who looked confused, past the violinist who was mid-serenade at the next table, past the hostess who blinked as I passed, probably assuming I'd forgotten my wallet. I hadn't. I'd forgotten her a long time ago, I just hadn't realized it yet. Most men over 60 know the quiet horror of realizing your wife has been preparing her exit while you were still planning her birthday. It's a particular kind of pain, not fire, not knives, just hollow, and hollow is dangerous. It echoes. That walk from the restaurant door to my car was the quietest of my life. My brain didn't race, my hands didn't shake. I just kept hearing her words, "You'll find everything's fair." I knew better. Nothing Maggie did was ever fair. Not when she accidentally forgot our anniversary last year. Not when she booked solo trips for self-care and came back tanner than usual. Not when she stopped laughing at my jokes but started wearing lipstick again. You want to know the worst part? She was so sure I'd fall apart, that I'd beg, that I'd plead, that I'd grovel like a man who just lost everything. But I didn't lose anything that night. I just woke up. If you're still reading, and you're one of the 97% who haven't hit that subscribe button, please do. It helps the team behind this bring you more stories like this. You'd be surprised how much it motivates us to dig deeper. Anyway, I drove home in silence, didn't put on the radio, didn't call anyone, just stared at the stoplights like they were chess pieces. Red, green, wait, go. The porch light was on when I got back. She wasn't home yet, still finishing her steak, maybe toasting herself with the dessert wine. I stepped inside, past our wedding photo still hanging in the hallway. She hadn't even taken that down yet, didn't care to. I didn't go to the bedroom, didn't touch the suitcase I'd packed a month ago, just in case. I walked straight to the laundry room, pushed aside the fake wall panel I'd installed myself back in 2006, and reached inside the old safe. Most people use safes for passports or jewelry. Mine had documents, old trust agreements, savings bonds from before we even married. Photocopies of everything we'd both signed, prenups, powers of attorney, purchase agreements, and one page I'd bookmarked with a single blue paperclip, Clause 11C. She'd signed it, she'd forgotten, and I hadn't. I sat on the washing machine and read it 3 times. Then I smiled. She thought I'd spent the last decade fading. Truth was, I'd been planning. The first call I made was to Richard, estate attorney. He owed me a favor. The second to Benny, my brother-in-law, but more importantly, a notary who hated Maggie with the fire of 1,000 suns. The third, a number I hadn't dialed in years. No name on it, just initials. M. Logan. By the time she'd finished dessert, her future was already rearranging itself. Quietly, legally, permanently. The next morning, the house felt like a museum curated by someone who forgot what love looked like. Half the master closet was empty, her side, predictably, and one of the kitchen drawers hung open, ransacked for whatever she deemed worth taking. The wine rack was cleared out, every bottle. She left the corkscrew, though. Nice of her. Our wedding photo still hung over the mantel. I didn't take it down, not out of sentiment, just inertia. The image had become so familiar it was like a hotel painting. Always there, never noticed. She hadn't bothered removing it either. Maybe she thought it still looked good. I walked into the kitchen, put on coffee, and opened the fridge. A single almond milk carton stared back. Of course. She hated almond milk. The suitcase by the stairs had been packed months ago, just the essentials, button-downs, backup chargers, a few good razors, and a hard drive containing 27 years of scanned documents. I'd been digitizing for years, slowly, methodically, under the guise of cleaning up the filing cabinet. She didn't notice, or didn't care. Either worked for me. I didn't sleep that night, didn't want to. Instead, I stood in front of the laundry room wall for a good 15 minutes before pressing the latch that opened the hidden compartment. Built it myself in '06, back when DIY projects were the only thing keeping me from slipping into full-blown marriage apathy. Inside the safe was everything Maggie had forgotten. Old bond certificates from my uncle's estate, 2 notarized amendments to a trust she'd signed during a wine-soaked weekend in Napa, the power of attorney revision she authorized while doped up on Valium after her second knee surgery. She never read anything, always said, "Just tell me where to sign, I trust you." Trust. Cute word. I pulled out a single page from a stack, Clause 11C. The language was dry, lawyer-ish, but I knew exactly what it meant. In the event of separation, if one party attempts to leverage marital assets against the other's prior holdings, a default reversion clause activates full asset protection under the originating trust. In English, if she tried to take half of what was originally mine, she'd legally forfeit her claim to anything created after, which meant her claim to the house, gone. The stocks she thought were in her name, frozen under my holding company, the rental property in Scottsdale she bragged about to her book club, already reassigned last month, courtesy of a signature she gave me without blinking. That page alone was worth 7 figures. I took a deep breath, then made my calls. First, Richard, estate lawyer, sharp as ever. "Ah," he said. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you. It's time then?" "Time," I replied. He chuckled. "All right, let's activate the clamps." Second, Benny, my sister's husband. We've never been close. He's a loudmouth, but useful when it counts. He was the notary on the 2017 refile of our post-nuptial agreement. "Remember that doc you stamped for Maggie while she was recovering from surgery?" I asked. "The one she said was for insurance?" "Sure," he said. "She barely looked at it." "Yeah, that one." Silence on the other end. Then, "Oh, damn." "Exactly." The third number took me a moment. It wasn't in my phone under a name, just M. Logan. I hadn't called that number in 5 years. It rang once. "Frank," came the voice, calm, neutral, the voice of a man who never asked unnecessary questions. "I need the ledger," I said, "and access to the private channel." "Understood," Logan replied. "You want it public or quiet?" "Quiet," I said. "For now." There was a pause. Then, "You'll have it by Friday." We hung up. No pleasantries. I stared at the safe for a long minute before closing it, latching the wall shut. Everything in there was legal, documented, timed, signed. She thought I'd be sleeping on a friend's couch by now, eating drive-through, crying into my pillow like some pathetic old man who'd lost his wife and didn't see it coming. She had no idea that the dull old man she discarded had already made himself legally invisible. The ache hadn't gone, not fully, but it had shifted, mutated. The sadness had calcified into something cleaner, intent, not anger, not revenge, just correction. The first thing I sold was the fishing boat. Not because I needed the money, but because it was symbolic. She always hated it, said it smelled like diesel and lost weekends. But that boat had outlasted most of our friends' marriages. And the funny part? It wasn't even in our name. I'd placed it under a Shell LLC years ago when her spending sprees started turning into self-justified emotional resets. Retail therapy, she called it. I called it erosion. I didn't touch our marital home. Didn't need to. The paperwork on that one had already been revised months ago during a refinance discussion she never showed up for. Her signature's on it, though, right next to the notary's. Benny again. God bless loudmouths with a pen and a grudge. The condo I moved into was a modest 2-bedroom tucked between a dog park and a closed-down diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, paid off in full, hidden under the Evermere Trust, filed in Arizona, where Maggie never looked twice. She once laughed at the name when she saw it in a file folder. "Sounds like a Lord of the Rings character," she'd said. I'd laughed with her. She never opened it. It's strange moving out of a house you technically still own, even stranger when your departure leaves no trace. I didn't take photos, no mementos. I left the wedding album, our anniversary gifts, even the cufflinks she bought me on our 10th year. I wanted no anchors. Instead, I took files, drives, password keys. One singular thumb drive taped inside a fake book titled Estate Planning for Retirees, a gift from her mother, ironically. In the second week, I filed a petition, quietly, discreetly, alleging financial coercion. It's not the kind of thing men usually report, but the law doesn't care about gender when you present clean spreadsheets. I had receipts, transfers, even 2 recorded calls where she'd said things like, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, just move it into my account," and "I handle the money, Frank, you're not great with numbers." She was right. I wasn't great with numbers. I was excellent. Her attorney started sending messages 3 days in, voicemails left in a tone I can only describe as polite condescension. "We'd like to discuss equitable division." I didn't respond. The 4th day, a formal letter arrived, typed and stiff. "We are requesting a response to our asset division proposal. Please acknowledge receipt." I acknowledged nothing. Instead, I transferred the cabin to my niece, Jessica. Technically, it was a gift, but I'd buried a clause in the deed stating it would revert to my name if sold before 2030, another Evermere clause. Another thing Maggie didn't know existed. The retirement account she once joked about raiding for a dream Italy trip was now under a different custodian, flagged with litigation protection. Every joint account was frozen. My name no longer appeared on them. Court order. It was beautiful. Clinical. She texted once. "Seriously? You're being childish. I'm trying to be civil." I stared at the message for a while. I could have responded with sarcasm, could have torn her apart with one line, but I'd learned something in all this. Silence unnerves them more. Still, I allowed myself one reply. "You'll hear from counsel soon." The read receipt pinged, then nothing. That night, I sat alone in the condo's tiny living room with a microwave Salisbury steak and a stack of legal documents. The hum of the refrigerator was louder than I remembered appliances being. My old lab, Daisy, lay curled at my feet. She'd followed me out without hesitation. Smart girl. She never liked Maggie much after the 2nd year. It wasn't sadness anymore. Not really. It was motion, movement, the slow, measured dismantling of a narrative she thought was written in stone. You don't argue with hurricanes. You board up your windows and wait for the sky to change. And I was already moving to higher ground. The parking garage beneath the old office plaza smelled like damp concrete and secrets. 3rd level down, low ceiling, flickering fluorescent lights, the kind of place you don't linger in unless you're there for a purpose. Logan was already there, leaning against a matte black SUV that didn't match the plates. His suit was too clean for a Thursday. His smile was thinner than it used to be. I didn't bother with greetings, just nodded once. "You brought it?" Logan opened the passenger door and reached inside for a plain gray binder. No markings, no labels. He handed it over like a communion offering. "Everything," he said. "From the first offshore transfer to the last wellness retreat." I flipped it open. The first page was a wire to a man named Bryce Holland, 32 grand over 3 months, labeled as executive coaching. The coaching took place mostly in Miami hotels. Her maiden name was on the receipts. Smart, not smart enough. Logan had tabs for everything. The Westbury card she opened through a shell company tied to her sister's address. The Venmo history she thought she deleted. Even screenshots of her encrypted messages. Logan's guy had mirrored her phone last year under the pretense of syncing her fitness tracker. "What's this one?" I asked, tapping a highlighted entry. "Cosmetic dentistry. Sent $8,700 to a Dr. Caruso. 3 payments. Boca Raton." "She always hated her smile," I muttered. "She used your social for the first payment," he said, grinning. "Bit sloppy." I closed the binder. "Thank you." Logan's eyes twinkled. "She played loud, you played quiet, but you played longer." "Always do," I said. "Want me to go public with any of it?" "Not yet. Let her finish the wine first." We shook hands. Nothing more. That's the thing with men like Logan. You don't small talk. You keep it brief and off camera. Back home, or technically the former marital home, Maggie had her circle over for wine night. I'd seen the security footage earlier that afternoon, still had the front door cameras linked to my account. She never changed the login. 6 women, mid-50s to early 60s, the kind that do yoga but still hate their knees, all in linen blouses and holding glasses like props. I recognized the core trio: Janine, who once cried at our vow renewal and then flirted with me in our kitchen, Shelley from her spin class cult, and Lorraine, who had texted me, "You deserve better," the night after the divorce dinner. They laughed loud, too loud, the performative kind. Maggie was at the center, gesturing dramatically, swirling her Cabernet like she was holding court in Versailles. "He just walked out," she said. "Didn't even fight. Honestly, it's kind of pathetic." More laughter. Someone clapped. Janine chimed in. "Are you sure he's not trying to screw you over quietly?" Maggie smirked. "Please, Frank couldn't screw in a light bulb without getting instructions notarized. He's not capable of that kind of scheme. Another sip. Another lie. She went on, bragging about how she was already looking at condos downtown, how the equity was locked in, how she'd win the split and still take her trip to Bali next spring. Funny. The house she stood in had already been reassigned via quiet title transfer, an Evermere trust maneuver finalized last Thursday. The ink was dry. She just didn't know yet. I hadn't triggered the lockout clause. Not yet. Let her laugh a little longer. One of the guests asked about a certain piece of art hanging in the foyer, something we bought in Santa Fe after a trip where Maggie got altitude sickness and blamed me for her headache for 3 straight days. "Oh, that's mine," she said. "I'm keeping it." Technically, no. The artist had never released the resale rights. I held the certificate in my Evermere vault. The moment she tries to sell it, the gallery will block the transaction. Another invisible tripwire. She was drunk on imagined victory. That was fine. Drunk people talk. I watched the footage from the condo, Daisy asleep at my feet, a bowl of reheated chili in my lap, Logan's binder resting on the side table. The more she laughed, the quieter I felt. But that silence, that wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Maggie thought she had time. After wine night, after the performance for her friends, she poured herself another glass and scrolled Zillow for condos she'd manifested. 2 beds, walkable to boutiques, marble countertops she'd never clean herself. She made a Pinterest board called Post Frank Freedom and even joked in a caption, "I'll get the rug, he can keep the dog." At 10:13 a.m. the next morning, her lawyer called. Her name was Sasha, young, sharp, all edges and confidence. Maggie picked her because she didn't take crap from men. Sasha wore blazers with shoulder pads and said things like, "We're going to bleed him dry," during initial consults. It had made Maggie feel powerful, capable. She liked the script. "We're ready to negotiate," Sasha said over speakerphone, pacing Maggie's living room in heels that sounded expensive and impractical. "We've reviewed the assets and believe we can propose something equitable." On the other end, Frank's attorney, Mr. Brooks, a man who'd aged like oak and had a reputation for shredding opposing counsel without raising his voice, responded simply, "There's nothing left to negotiate. You'll receive the proposed terms within the hour." Sasha paused. "Excuse me?" Maggie looked up from her espresso and mouthed, "What's going on?" Brooks continued, calm as always. "The marital assets have already been audited, separated, and secured. Your client will receive the final statement shortly." Click. Call ended. "What the hell was that?" Maggie barked. Sasha didn't answer right away. She was staring at her tablet, refreshing her inbox. And then, there it was, an email. Subject, "Final proposal, Lane v. Lane" attached. A 43-page PDF with a single-line preface, "Per previous authorizations." Sasha opened it. By the 3rd page, her hands started to tremble. "Maggie," she said carefully, Did you sign anything after your second knee surgery?" Maggie frowned. "What? I mean, yeah, probably. Insurance stuff. Frank handled that." "Do you remember a trust restructuring?" "God, no, I could barely walk." Sasha flipped to a scanned document, notarized, dated, Benny's signature on the bottom, Maggie's handwriting clearly visible. "Clause 14B, Sasha muttered. "Consent to voluntary asset reassignment in exchange for private medical debt coverage." Maggie's face paled. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means you authorize the transfer of several marital assets to a protected trust under Frank's sole management and waived your claim to any proceeds derived from those assets post-2019. "But he never paid for my surgery." "No," Sasha said slowly, "because the surgery was already covered. This was a decoy clause. Legally valid, though. He baited you with paperwork you never read." Maggie stood, the espresso cup shaking slightly in her grip. "This can't be real." Sasha kept flipping. "The house, legally reassigned 17 months ago via title shift through the Evermere Trust. Investment portfolios, liquidated and restructured into accounts with restricted access pending litigation, a litigation she was never notified of because she waived rights to advance notice when she signed a separate confidentiality addendum." Another signature. Hers. "Pension, separated and moved under Frank's name via deferred payment clause activated upon legal separation." She'd initialed that one too. "I don't understand," Maggie said, voice cracking. "It's already done," Sasha said. "This isn't possible." "It's legal," Sasha corrected. "It's not only possible, it's finished." Maggie sank into the kitchen stool, the same one she used to scold Frank from when he overcooked the Sunday roast or didn't rinse his plate. The same stool she'd perched on while sending texts to Bryce Holland in Florida, pretending she was venting to her coach. Now she was the one being coached on how her empire had collapsed while she was sipping Merlot and gloating about marble countertops. Then came the final blow. Sasha turned the tablet toward her. "Recognize this?" Maggie squinted. It was a scanned card, her handwriting, a cheesy Hallmark anniversary message written 3 years ago. "You're the only man I'll ever trust with everything. Love, Maggie." Below it, her full signature. It had been used to authorize the first of the asset separations. She laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "That's not fair." Sasha didn't reply. She didn't need to. Fair had never been part of the plan. She pulled into the driveway, humming something upbeat from the radio, the kind of song women blast when they're taking back control. Her sunglasses were too big, her nails too sharp, and her smile, plastic. Still, she wore it like armor. Then she saw the garage door, open, empty. Her smile faltered. No Lexus, no Frank's old truck, just oil stains and silence. She parked curbside, stepped out in heels that weren't meant for uneven pavement, and marched up to the keypad by the front door. Beep, beep, red light. She entered it again, slower this time. The same code it had always been. Her birthday, backwards, denied. A dull beep echoed again, mechanical and final. "Are you serious?" She tried Frank's old code. Nothing. She even tried the dog's birth year, just in case. Locked. She rang the doorbell like that would help, then fumbled with her keys and found the one for the side entrance. That door worked. Sort of. The deadbolt was gone. The handle turned with a limp clunk and swung open into what used to be a foyer. Now, just echo. The rug was gone. The framed wedding photo from the hallway, gone. The scent of furniture polish and stale potpourri, gone. Every drawer in the hallway sideboard was open and empty. Kitchen cabinets, stripped bare. Even the cheap wine glasses she always mocked were missing. He took everything, even the junk. She moved room to room, faster now. No couches, no books. The office was empty except for a single Ethernet cable coiled like a dead snake on the carpet. The safe in the bedroom closet, her secret stash, was missing entirely. The whole section of drywall it was bolted into had been removed, plaster dust still clinging to the floor. She dropped to her knees, ran her hand along the carpet, then sat there. Just sat there. A yellow sticky note was taped to the vanity mirror. Frank's handwriting. "Look under the front mat." Her breath caught. She stood up slowly, walked to the front door, opened it. Under the mat, a plain envelope. No logo, no stamps, just her name in tight black ink. Inside, a single sheet of thick cream paper with a familiar letterhead. "Brooks and Keller, Frank's attorney. We settle today. Whatever he wants. No signature, no threats, just the sentence." And stapled behind it, a list. Asset reassignments, legal transfers, dates, clauses. Her own initials next to each one. Clause 11C, Clause 14B, post-nuptial waivers, medical proxy revocations, a termination letter she had once signed for insurance consolidation, which had legally removed her name from the pension trust. It was like watching her own hands write her own obituary. Every move, every trick, every little emotional jab she'd made over the past 5 years, cataloged, time-stamped, and neutralized. Frank hadn't fought her. He'd evacuated. She dropped onto the front steps, clutching the envelope like it might spontaneously change its contents. She stared out at the street, empty except for a neighbor's kid learning how to ride a bike. Behind her, the house no longer felt like hers. Not because Frank took everything, but because suddenly she realized she'd never really owned it at all. She had performed in it, played wife in it, hosted book club and judged her friends' marriages from the safety of its walls. Now, she was just trespassing. The confusion settled slowly, like fog after a car crash. She wasn't angry yet. Anger required energy. All she had was the creeping understanding that something had happened, to her, and no one was going to fix it. Her phone buzzed in her purse. A text. From Sasha. He filed the closure agreement, effective today. No apology, no wiggle room, just like Frank. And for the first time in a long, long time, Maggie had absolutely no idea what to do next. It started with Carol. Of course it did. Carol, who never minds her own business, who collects gossip like it's currency. Maggie was halfway through a yoga flow in her temporary rental, barely furnished, vaguely smelling like someone else's dog, when the phone rang. "Maggie," Carol said, no hello. "Did you sell the lake property? Because Jill said Frank's name is on the deed alone now, and he told her you signed it over?" Maggie sat back on her mat, heart tapping against her ribs. "What? No, he's lying. Carol paused. Well, it's in the registry now, county records. The call ended shortly after, but the flood had only begun. 3 more that day, one from Dana. So, you're not part of the wine bar anymore? One from Shelley. Did you actually give up your stake in the Naples condo? One from Brad, who used to flirt with Maggie during charity galas and once joked about whisking her away if Frank ever got boring. His message was just one line. Guess you underestimated the quiet ones. She didn't reply. By the end of the day, she'd turned her phone to silent and thrown it into a drawer next to unopened mail and a bottle of cheap Merlot. The wine rack she used to fill with Bordeaux was now reduced to a grocery store clearance bin. Everything felt smaller. The next morning, it was her oldest friend, Connie. I'm not picking sides, Connie said, though the tone already had. But it's just wild. I mean, I always thought Frank was just there, quiet, dull. Now, he's like, Frank the executioner. What did you do to him? Maggie said nothing. The silence on her end was deafening. Connie lowered her voice. You shouldn't have humiliated him like that, Mag. Over dinner? On your anniversary? Click. Maggie ended the call. The room went quiet again. The mirror above the rental's faux fireplace still had tape residue from the last tenant. The art on the walls was generic. She didn't feel at home. She felt like a squatter in her own aftermath. Then came the final message. A text. From Allison, the one friend Maggie thought she could still rely on, the one who knew every version of her and loved her anyway. He played you cleaner than anyone I've ever seen. You thought he was just there. He wasn't. No emojis, no softener, just that. It sat there in her notifications for hours. She opened it 4 times, never typed a reply. But that wasn't the worst. The worst came at dusk. The phone rang again. Maggie, expecting Sasha, answered without checking. Hello? Her mother's voice was cold and precise, not angry, disappointed in the way that only maternal judgment can slice deep. You should have never embarrassed him like that, her mother said. Maggie blinked. What? I told you, she continued. All those years you rolled your eyes at him, the jokes, the way you spoke to him in front of people. It matters. Frank always paid attention. You just never believed he'd do anything with it. I didn't. I'm not asking for an explanation, her mother said. I'm telling you what everyone else is thinking. You gambled on him folding. Then, and you lost. Click. Maggie stared at her phone, trembling. She wasn't used to losing, not socially, not emotionally, not in the little games she played to keep herself feeling above water, but the water was rising, and for the first time, she was the one without a life raft. She turned on the TV, anything to drown out the silence, but even the laugh track on the sitcom felt like it was mocking her. She muted it, sat back on the couch that didn't belong to her, in a rental that wasn't hers, with a glass of wine she didn't want, and realized there was no one left to call. The card was declined at the gas station, $64.38. She thought it was a glitch. Tried again. Different card. Declined. The guy behind the counter gave her that look, the one young men give middle-aged women they assume are shopping on someone else's dime. She forced a smile and said, I'll just run to the ATM. The ATM spat the card back. Transaction unavailable. 3 minutes later, sitting in the driver's seat of a car she no longer technically owned, though she didn't know that yet, Maggie opened her mobile banking app. Loading. Then, Chase Personal Checking, $0, restricted access. Evergreen Money Market, $118.22, frozen, joint account. Closed high yield portfolio, access suspended, pending review. She blinked, hit refresh, same numbers. She opened her backup bank's app, an account she'd kept under her maiden name. Balance, $7.19. Recent activity, transfer to Evermere Holdings, completed. Her fingers stiffened around the phone, cold sweat at her collarbone. She stared through the windshield, watching traffic pass, her thoughts scrambling like static. The manila envelope at the anniversary dinner, the binder, the sticky note on the mirror. She hadn't understood then. Now, it was starting to come into focus. She called the bank, a tight smile in her voice to hide the panic. Yes, hi, I'm trying to understand why all my accounts are frozen. I didn't authorize any holds. The woman on the other end was polite but firm. A litigation hold was placed several weeks ago due to pending legal activity. It appears there's an active estate and trust dispute filed. I didn't file anything. No, ma'am, the banker replied. But Mr. Lane did. The protective order was processed under compliance regulations tied to the marital assets. Your access was restricted pending review. All withdrawals and transfers after the date of motion are legally frozen. This is a mistake, Maggie snapped. I'm the spouse. I'm entitled to half. The woman paused. Then, you'll want to speak to your legal representative. Everything is properly documented. Click. Maggie threw the phone into the passenger seat and screamed. Not a theatrical scream, not frustration. This was real, gut-born, desperate. She didn't even feel the tears at first, just the pulsing headache building between her eyes. She fumbled for her lawyer's number and hit call. Sasha picked up after 2 rings. Maggie, I thought you said I'd get half. Sasha sighed. You would've, if you hadn't signed it away. I never signed anything. You signed everything, Sasha snapped. That surgery waiver, the refinance doc, the household restructuring clause from 2020, the one with the initial on page 6 and the signature on page 9, that's a binding forfeiture. You waived claim to future earnings derived from any asset not actively held in both names. You're making this sound like I handed him the crown jewels. You did, in writing, multiple times. Maggie's throat went dry. I want to fight this. You can't, Sasha said bluntly. You already agreed. It's not a fight anymore. It's cleanup. Maggie said nothing. Couldn't. Then Sasha delivered the final cut, the one that would echo for weeks. He's not fighting you, Maggie. He already won. There was no yelling after that, no bargaining, just silence on both ends of the line, the kind that makes a person wonder not how they lost, but how long ago they started losing. She sat in that car for nearly an hour, engine off, watching as the world continued like nothing had changed. For everyone else, it hadn't. But for Maggie Lane, the accounts were closed, the trust was gone, the kingdom had crumbled, and the king she thought was asleep on the throne had burned the castle down behind her back. The mediation room was beige, not metaphorically, literally. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige chairs. It was the kind of room that tried so hard to be neutral it ended up suffocating. Maggie sat on one side of the table in a blazer she hadn't worn in years, makeup too sharp, smile too tight. Her lawyer sat beside her, posture brittle, tablet at the ready. Maggie had insisted on makeup that morning, hair done, statement earrings. She needed to look like someone who hadn't lost everything. Across from her, Frank wore a gray sweater and slacks like he was attending a dentist appointment, hands folded, calm, completely unbothered. He didn't look smug, he didn't look cold, he just looked done. Maggie tried charm first. Frank, she said, voice laced with practiced softness, do we really want to drag this out? We both know this doesn't have to be hostile. No reaction. She leaned in slightly. Look, I know things got messy, but we had years together. That has to mean something. Still nothing. She blinked, let out a shaky sigh, then moved to plan B. I was scared, she said, softer now. You were always so distant. I didn't know how to reach you. That's why I made mistakes. I admit that. But I thought we could split this in a way that honors mistakes, Frank finally said, looking her dead in the eyes. His first word all day. No emotion, just curiosity. That what you're calling it? She froze. The mediator, a middle-aged man in wire-rimmed glasses and a wedding ring worn thin, cleared his throat. Mr. Lane, he said gently, what are your terms? Frank reached into a simple leather folio and pulled out a manila folder. He pushed it across the table toward the mediator. I want nothing from her, Frank said evenly. She can keep the furniture, the towels, the espresso machine. I don't care. Maggie narrowed her eyes. Then what is this? She asked, hand snapping the folder open. It wasn't demands, it was receipts. Chronologically organized, tabbed, and annotated like an accountant on a mission. Page 1. A Venmo receipt to Bryce Holland, labeled coaching, dated the same weekend Frank's father died, when Maggie said she had to be out of town for emotional space. Page 4. A screenshot of her private Instagram story where she clinked glasses with a man in sunglasses, captioned, finally some real company, timestamped while Frank was at their nephew's graduation, alone. Page 7. A purchase receipt for a weekend stay at a beachside resort in Boca, booked under her maiden name, paid using an account linked to their joint Amex. She thought Frank didn't check statements anymore. He did. Then the photos. Not scandalous, just damning. Her laughing in unfamiliar places, her spending nights away without excuse, her texting lies next to time-stamped truth. And then came the final page. It was scanned from an old anniversary card, 10 years ago, written in her handwriting, "You're the only man who never let me down. Here's to forever. Love, Mags." At the bottom, under her signature, Frank had written a single line in blue ink. I held up my end. She gasped. For real this time, no performance, no script. Just a sound ripped from the base of her throat like something cracked open inside her. Frank stood, slowly, deliberately. I don't need revenge, he said, sliding his hands back into his pockets. I don't need anything. The mediator looked at Maggie, then back at Frank. You're certain you don't want to claim? I want her to remember who she buried, Frank replied. That's enough. He turned and walked out. No last glance, no smirk, no curtain call, just the quiet steps of a man who had already done everything he came to do. The door clicked shut behind Frank, soft and final, the kind of sound that doesn't echo, but stays. Maggie sat frozen in her chair, hands limp in her lap, eyes locked on the folder still splayed open on the table. The card on the last page stared back at her like a verdict. I held up my end. Across the room, her lawyer was already packing up, face tight with restraint, as if afraid to speak. But then she hesitated, picked up one more envelope from her briefcase, sealed, cream-colored, Frank's name printed in clean block letters. I'll catch him, she muttered. By the time she caught up, Frank was already outside the building, halfway across the parking lot, sun hitting the back of his gray sweater. He didn't turn around when he heard her heels on the pavement, just slowed slightly, as if he knew. Mr. Lane, she called out. He stopped. She walked up, extended the envelope. We settled today, she said, voice quieter this time, not the confident bite she used to lead with, not even a request, more like surrender. Whatever you want. Frank took the envelope, didn't open it, didn't even look down. I already have what I want, he said. She stood there awkwardly. It's a full concession. You'd still come out ahead if you... He shook his head. No need. And with that, he turned and kept walking. Reached his truck, old Chevy, still dusty from the lake roads. Opened the door. Daisy wagged her tail once from the passenger seat and thumped it back down again. Frank got in, started the engine. As the truck rolled past the glass front of the building, Maggie stood behind the tinted window, arms crossed tightly over her stomach like she was bracing for a blow that had already landed. Her reflection in the glass looked pale, thin, not in body, but in presence. She had spent the last 6 months crafting a new life, a new narrative, one where she was the phoenix rising from suburban mediocrity, where she traded up, played smart, got out while she was still desirable. Now, she was a footnote in someone else's legend. Frank didn't destroy her, he revealed her. And the worst part was, everyone knew. The mediator would talk, the lawyers would talk. The friends who once echoed her stories would now dissect the timeline. People love a twist. They love the quiet guy who turns out to be 10 steps ahead. She wasn't the cautionary tale, she was the punchline. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She didn't want to look, but she did. One new message. Frank. She opened it. Next time, keep the envelope. It holds more than you think. She stared at the words until they blurred. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She didn't know if she wanted to reply, or scream, or cry. But what do you say to a man who beat you without raising his voice? There was no reply button for that.